Welcome, patrons. Oh, good lord, I know like 99% of you don't know much about what goes on behind the scenes, but this might be the most complicated video I've done yet. Perhaps only because there's just so much to sift through. If you're one of the honored Elven on Patreon, you know how long this video has been delayed. While I try to collect as many details as I possibly can, I still feel like I missed something. But with that, here it is, what I hope to be most of what we know on the Warden. Differences. A big highlight for Dragon Age Origins was the origins. Each origin gave the Warden a widely different backstory and helped not only the replayability, but the feel of the Warden. For the most part, the Wardens all start out in different places with different backgrounds, but as the game progresses, all converge on two different paths, which we'll get to in a bit. So let's start out with the different origins, what we know about them, which includes past, present, and future, and then move on to what they all have in common. Although, that being said, I'm not about to go into the plot of the exact origins because we just don't have time for that, so this is just the basics. The origins. The Mage Wardens. While both the human and elf Mage Warden have different family backgrounds, they seem to have the same type of life in the circle. Both somehow befriend Jowen at a young age. If female, Colin has a crush on them, and all are considered to be talented, and it's hinted that they were first Enchanter Irving's apprentice. Both take their harrowing, and Cullen was tasked to be the one to strike down the Warden if they were to be possessed. Their harrowing is uneventful for the most part. All are tempted by a clever pride demon trying to possess them by pretending to be a mage who died in the past and was now trapped in the Fade. How they leave the circle depends on you, but regardless if you help Jowen in his stupid plan or not, Irving always parts with you in a positive way. Both also share rewards in the epilogue. If the Warden died, a new circle tower is ordered to be built as the veil in the old one has become too weak. This new tower is named after the Mage Warden. This new circle tower is also ordered to become autonomous, but as this issue resides with the Chantry, not the Ferelden leader, this never actually was put into place. Which I don't know why the leaders didn't think of that. Like, I don't know if it's just bad writing or that it really highlights how Alistair doesn't know how to rule or Honora is just leading you on, but someone should have thought that this wasn't going to work. And that's about it. So with all that in mind, let's talk about the two separately. Warden Amell. Like I mentioned in the Your Champion video, the protagonist of Dragon Age 2 is related to Warden Amell. Because I went into deep details about the Amell family in that video, please check that out for a more complete history. But to sum up the basics, your mother is named Revka Amell, your father is an unknown man, but together they had 5 children, and the Warden Amell is the oldest. You were ripped away from your family in Kirkwall at a young age, leaving your mother weeping in the streets. It is unknown what became of Revka, but she disappeared after her father died. The Warden Amell's father took the remaining children away from Kirkwall, but eventually the other 4 children were found to be mages as well. Their current whereabouts are unknown. Hawke, the Dragon Age 2 player character, is the child of your mother's cousin. The Warden Amell is mentioned a bit in Dragon Age 2 in just brief moments where Hawke and their family are aware that the hero Ferelden is from their family, but there has been no mention as if the two have met or have been in contact before. It's unknown what the exact age of Amell is, but the timeline suggests that they were born before 9/11 Dragon, making them at least 19 years old at the start of the game. This date is imperfect and comes from the fact that the Amell being taken away from the Templars is talked about before Aristide Amell dies, which is your grandfather, and also in itself is a debated date. A more reasonable guess would be in their 20s, as when someone is taken to the circle, they are usually in their early to mid-childhood, although on top of that, when one takes their harrowing, they are usually in their late teens to early 20s, as it's seen as a coming-of-age ceremony. I guess the main takeaway of all this is we don't have any solid dates on their age. Warden Cerana. Warden Cerana is unique to the other Wardens in that we have basically nothing for their past. At one point, you can talk to another elven mage and can choose where you came from originally, being the Denerim alienage, Lothering, or not remembering at all. But after that, there is no known history or relatives to a Warden Cerana. Their age is probably similar to Amell, late teens to early 20s. Warden Tabrez. The name Tabrez carries some weight for city elves as they are highly respected in the alienages, both Denerim and Highever. It's unknown the exact reason why, but it's described that they have a reputation for being hard-headed and having a rebellious nature, which is unusual for elves living in the alienage. Your father is Syrian Tabrez, and he married a woman named Adaya. While she was killed by humans before the start of the City Elf origin, you can actually meet Adaya as Liliana in Liliana's song.
I have people waiting.
Girl, you are wonderful. Thank you. I will teach my child of humans like you. You're a light in this dark place.
I don't know if I'm that.
In the DLC, you have the option to free other prisoners in a dungeon, and Adaya is among them. Before her death, Adaya was able to pass down her combat training to you, although the exact training depends on your class. And here I want to talk a bit about Adaya and when she died, because it's sort of all over the place. While there is no hard dates in the game where she died, it said that you were young, but old enough to learn combat training, but also not old enough to really remember her very well. Adaya, it seems, has become victim to the early Dragon Age origin timelines, where the dates are mixed up and the facts don't matter. Anyway, you also have the choice to inherit a dagger from your mother. Although in the game it's labeled as Fang, the description of the item lists it as Fang of Fen-Harel, and describes that it was passed down on since the time of the Dales when the elves actually had a nation. You don't actually get this though if you sell the elves, or your father, to Tevinter. In the origin, you also get to meet two of your cousins, Shiani, who is the daughter of an unknown paternal aunt, and Soris, who is the son of another unknown sibling of your father's. In the opening of the origin, Soris marries a woman named Valora, who, although he describes as being mousy looking, he learns to appreciate her. Valora would eventually be one of the victims who was taken into slavery by the Tevinters. Shiani never knew her father, and her mother died of sickness when she was young. Your father traveled to where she was in the country and brought her into your home, where it's described that he gave her a stuffed Mihari that once belonged to the Warden Tabrez. Tabrez's age is unknown, but assumed to be somewhere between 18 and early 20s. Between the two potential spouses, Nelaros always dies, but Nesaria is saved by the Warden. Nesaria is taken back home to Highever after she is rescued. In the epilogue, the ruler of Ferelden decides that the alienage needs his own ruler and someone to speak during lance meets. Syrian, Shiani, Soris, or someone else, or the Warden can become the new Ban. Regardless of what you choose, Shiani becomes the new Haren of the alienage, although if Shiani becomes the Ban as well, she will be murdered. If Soris was imprisoned and then released, he leaves to Orlais and joins the Thieves Guild. If he was never imprisoned or made ban, he would later marry a wealthy human woman. This caused an uproar in both communities, and he would later leave for Highever, and it's described that the two had many children. If the Warden was named a ban, things are prosperous for a time, even drawing in elves from other places, but soon humans become jealous of the elves and a riot happens. If someone else was made ban, there's a riot and they are also murdered. However, no matter who is chosen, all leads to the same ending. A food shortage eventually happens, causing distress in the alienage, and eventually most of the elven population leaves in hope of a better life. Warden Braska. The Dwarven commoner was born to a woman named Kala and an unknown dwarven father. Rika, the sister you meet, is described as being your older half-sister, although it's unknown who her father is. Kala and the Warden's father wanted to marry, but Kala refused to follow your father's dream of going to the surface. So he left Kala, you, and Orzammar behind to places unknown. This breakup is how Kala became dependent to alcohol. It's unknown the exact age of Braska, but it's assumed to be around late teens to early 20s. Your sister Rika ends up dating and bearing the son of Prince Balin a Dukan, so you now have a nephew named Indran. Because of the birth, Balin moves Rika and Kala into the royal palace while you're gone. In the end, Braska is named a paragon and a new noble house is founded in their name, meaning the name of the house is the name of the character. So many castles join this house that it becomes the largest in Orzammar. Because all of old Braska's house moves into the new house, the old house is basically dissolved. Rika, who is present at the ending celebrations, will tell you that Kala has become sober in honor of what the Dwarf Warden has done. If Balin was killed, Rika reports that she's doing just fine, that her son is still in a Dukan, and she doesn't actually have a husband to boss her around anymore, so maybe it wasn't that bad. In Inquisition, we learn that if Balin is king and Braska is alive, that he has married Rika and placed a statue of the new paragon in front of the royal palace so that all may notice who his wife is related to. If Hermont is king, a statue is just placed in the Hall of Heroes. If you do not play as Braska, you are able to find Leski, a friend you meet in the origin in the dungeon of the Carta. He mentions that his friend stopped eating for a bet. This friend is most likely Braska. Also, fun facts, Kala makes a guest appearance in Dragon Age 2 as the one who writes the codex entry for Hands of the Carta. Warden Mihari. Mihari's history is a bit complicated in that Dalish names are weird. The clan that Mihari grew up in was named Sabre. That is, obviously, not their last name. So what is the name Mihari from? The most likely answer is that it's carried over from another clan. The question is, who did they inherit from? It's a common practice to move Dalish mages around, so it's possible that Mihariel's father carried the name, but as your mother is also from another clan, it could be that the Dalish carry surnames of their mothers. Mihariel's father was the former keeper of the Tabrez clan, and he fell in love with and married a hunter from another clan. It's not stated why, but the pairing of the two was controversial. Just before Mihariel was born, their parents were ambushed by a group of humans and city elves. While your father was killed, your mother was able to escape and shortly thereafter gave birth to the Warden. Your mother soon disappeared after that in grief, and ever since, you are raised by a shell. You became a hunter in the clan and befriended Tamlin. If female and if you choose the right options, you have a choice for romantic paths between the two of you. After Tamlin disappears, Ashell can even say that she had hoped for a future for you two. This also triggers a romantic thing goodbye when you meet him again during the Shriek attack. Meryl also mentioned Mihariel a lot in Dragon Age 2, saying that she misses them and that perhaps they were once friends. In the epilogue, Keeper Mihari is given lands in the hinterlands north of the Kukari Wilds, which includes Ostagar, to own. If alive, the Dalish hero can even return with their clan. Now, as you see in Dragon Age 2, Keeper Mihari isn't actually in these lands. As posted about on the old BioWare forums after Dragon Age Origins, the clan split in two. Keeper Mihari had a mission from Flemeth that she needed to complete and took with her a small amount of the clan to the Free Marches. The rest is led by Ashell in the new homeland, if they have it. It's assumed that if the Dalish do not have a new homeland in Ferelden, that half of the clan is still just wandering the woods of Ferelden. Now, what happens to the Warden's clan after Origins is mostly in the hands of Hawke. We know that before Hawke gets to the Dalish, something caused the death of all of their Hala, which keeps them stranded at the base of Sundermount. Keeper Mihari always dies, but it's possible that the clan either leaves Kirkwall or is killed completely. Warden Cousland. So to start the line of the Couslands, let's jump all the way back to the Towers Age and to Flemeth. Before Flemeth had attached herself to Mythal, she married a man named Conabar Elston, who, fun fact, is a descendant of the Howe family. This man was the ruler of Highever. Eventually, when Flemeth killed Conabar, his captain of the guard took over the lands and title. This man was Sarum Cousland. Now at that time, it was only a Benorn. It would become a tenure during the Black Age at the height of the lycanthrope plague that swept Ferelden. Ban Mather and Halia Cousland gathered together several lords to drive out the werewolves that threatened their land and earning the title of Tiern. Now what is a Tiern? I will watch my video on Ferelden for a better explanation, but for the most part, there are only two Tierns in Ferelden. Your family and Loghain's. The two families are the most powerful families in Ferelden after the king. Speaking of the Theron line, when Kellenhead Theron made his way up to unite Ferelden in the Exalted Age, he would actually end up fighting against then Tierna Althea Cousland. She would lose the battle, but would swear fealty to him to keep her lands. We then jump to the Storm Age when King Arlen Theron, who many would describe as a tyrant, was in power. He had warred with his cousin Sophia Dryden over the crown, and she had lost, but then joined the Grey Wardens of Ferelden to avoid execution. Now, despite the Grey Warden oath against mingling in politics, she began to plan a rebellion, and the Couslands joined in. The rebellion was eventually betrayed and shut down, with Tairn Cousland being killed before Arlen marched on Soldier's Peak. And here we jump to the Blessed Age and the war with Orlais. While the Couslands were loyal to the Theron line in Ferelden, nearby Amaranthine was loyal to Orlais. The two would be warring for most of the occupation until the Couslands managed to capture Harper's Ford and hung the Jarl of Amaranthine, Tarleton Howe. What's interesting is that while the Hounds were loyal to Orlais, the Jarl's brother Byron Howe joined the rebellion, and then the Jarl's son, Rendon Howe, would join the rebellion with his uncle. Both Bryce Cousland and Rendon Howe were two of only 50 survivors of the Battle of White River, and after that, the two became close friends. That is, until Howe betrayed them at the urging of Loghain. But we'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about the Warden's immediate family. Unlike pretty much the rest of the Wardens, perhaps beside Dukan, the Cousland family actually has its own section in the world of Thedas. Much of it has to do with how Eleanor met Bryce. Eleanor was the second daughter of Ban Fearchar mac Inraig of the Storm Coast, who is rumored to be a raider. All of his children were raised on the decks of warships. Eleanor was skilled in naval battle, taking down her first Orlesian ship at 15. Her own ship, named the Mistral, was so feared by Orlesians, she was nicknamed the Sea Wolf and was described as a monster on the sea. Eventually, after Merrick reclaimed Denerim from the Orlesians, he knew that the Orlesians would attack by ship, in which he gathered help from the Mac and Riggs. It's here that Bryce, a decorated war hero, was placed on the Mistral and met Eleanor. Apparently, their first meeting went so terribly, it became the source of a popular sea shanty called The Soldier and the Sea Wolf, something that neither of them had apparently told their children. But in battle, the two grew close, and together they took down nearly a dozen enemy ships. Eventually, Bryce's father, Terran William Cousland, succumbed to sickness, and as Bryce was the only son, he returned to High Ever to claim his birthright. Bryce grew bored of this new life, and for 4 months straight, he sent at least 1 letter to Eleanor every day, sometimes more. One letter was rumored just to be a stick figure drawing of him being bored in High Ever's Great Hall. The two met in person again at the formal coronation of King Merrick after the war. Bryce proposed to Eleanor by singing her all 10 verses of The Soldier and the Sea Wolf. Or at least he tried to, and she only let him get to 3 verses, and it was not sung at the wedding. Which, in World of Thetis, it actually has a few verses of the shanty. I won't be reading it for you here because the video is too long as it is, but here is a picture of it and you can just pause the video and read it yourself. Anyway, your older brother Fergus married an Antivan woman named Oriana. She was the daughter of a wealthy merchant. Together, they had a young son named Orin. And now we get back to the unfortunate part where Howe killed the entire Cousland line, minus the Warden if chosen, and Fergus, who was sent to Ostagar early, with many of the High Ever troops. After the deaths of the Couslands, Howe took the title of Terran for himself. Eventually, no matter what, Fergus is found alive. He has an unusual story of how he survived. He and his men never made it to Ostagar. Instead, he was attacked by Darkspawn on the way there, and most of his men were killed. He awoke later in a chastened hut, severely wounded, and only made his way out of the wilds just in time for the Battle of Denerim. He can be met again in the epilogue, where he shows how proud of you he is. While the Warden goes off to unknown adventures, or even returns back to High Ever to help straighten up, Fergus inherits the High Ever land and becomes Terran again. If the Warden has died, Fergus is also given the rights to Amaranthine, Howe's lands, which he then gives to the Wardens. Now, the human noble actually has a unique feature of being able to become king or queen of Ferelden by marrying a Nora or Alistair, regardless if they are romanced or not. But even if you choose this option, the Warden leaves behind the throne in the end. Warden the Dukan. As with most major Dwarven families, it begins with a paragon. It's unknown what Adukin's original family name was, but it's known that he was of the warrior caste. He married a woman named Annika and had an unknown amount of daughters. Then, the First Blight hits. The details aren't really important, but Dwarven politics at the time of the Blight were too busy worrying about something else. New House would send soldiers to save other houses, which is partly the reason why so many Taigs were destroyed in the early years of the Blight. When the Blight was beginning to close in on Orzammar, Adukin, seeing that the nobles would rather die than end the political fighting, went above his rank and enlisted the entire mining caste to collapse passages the Darkspawn could use, and then the Smith class to help arm them. He effectively shut Orzammar off from the Darkspawn and all other Dwarven Taigs. This ultimately saved the entire Dwarven population, and Adukin was named a Paragon for his actions. Even today, he is considered one of the most popular of Paragons, as he was the only one to get a 100% vote to be raised up. And the one person who did try to vote against him was murdered before the vote. Despite all that he had accomplished, rumor states that he was deeply troubled and had fits of melancholy and self-doubt, and cursed himself for not being able to save the other Taigs. From the Adukin house, 9 kings have been from the family, and there seems to be some confusion on this, as there have been reports on non-Adukin kings between this time and when Dragon Age Origin starts, but at the same time there are also claims that a Adukin line has been ruling unbroken for almost 370 years. Now, there is also a huge list of famous Adukins, but 2 that may be of interest to your Warden are 2 Grey Wardens. Durnan Adukin, who has a memorial in the Western Approach, and Forel Adukin, who had a mace at some point. Now, let's talk about your immediate family. Your grandfather was named Ansgar Adukin, and he has 3 children, an eldest son, your father Endrin, and a daughter. The daughter would end up having a son named Piaton, who you can meet in Orzammar during the Provings, and depending on your choices, you might also have killed. He has the nickname the Horns of My Army, given to him by your oldest brother Trian. Ansgar's oldest son was in line for the throne before your father. He would be convinced to fight in a proving against a known murderer by your father Endrin, and died from poison that was on the blade. It's believed that Endrin was responsible for the poison. Endrin became king in 896 Blessed and was known as one of the most respected kings in generations. He married an unknown woman who died when the Warden was young. Endrin had 3 children, Trian, Yu, and Balin. As you probably know, Trian is in line to be king and Yu become the general for the army. Now, in terms of all the Warden's ages, the Dwarf Noble Warden has the possibility of being the oldest Warden. Balin is listed as being 21 years old, and Trian is 25, making this Warden somewhere in between them. While there's little known about the relationship between the Warden and the rest of their family, it's stated that you are Endrin's favorite child. The Warden's second, or a dude from the warrior caste that helps when you get into fights, is a man named Goran Salek. If female, you can choose to confirm that the two have a romantic past, but the two are unable to marry because he is of a lower caste. And unrelated to Goran, if male, you can choose to sleep with 2 noble hunters, who are women that are looking to have the son of a nobleman so that they can have their caste raised. If you have slept with Marty, she does conceive a son, which you can talk to her about later when you come back to Orzammar. You can choose to confirm that the son is yours and bring him into the Dukan clan, as well as name him. This means that Amell Dukan is the only warden that has a child outside of Kieran, and that Kieran has a possibility of having a half-sibling. Your younger brother Balin has also been sleeping with a castless woman named Rika Braska, the Dwarf Commoner's half-sister. You are able to meet her in the noble opening, running out of your brother's room. Later, they have a son that is named Endrin. If Balin is made king, you will learn that he has married Rika, which is shocking to all. Now, behind the scenes, Balin has been planning the murder of Trian for some time. You may not know much about it, and I won't go too much into it, but a demo for Dragon Age Origin exists. It's unvoiced, but tells the story of Balin setting up the murder of Trian. From this demo, we know that the shield that the Warden is tasked to find was actually placed in the tomb by Balin himself. In the days before Trian's murder, Balin tries to manipulate the Warden into killing Trian himself, which you can't actually do. If the Warden doesn't take the bait, Balin still has a backup plan and frames the Warden for the murder. And thus, the Warden is exiled to the deep roads, but is saved by Dukan, who recruits them to the Wardens. Goram, on the other hand, is exiled to the surface. In the time between being exiled and the war on going to Denerim for the first time, Goram is now unable to fight due to a leg injury, has married a surface dwarf, started a shop selling wares his new father-in-law makes, and has a child on the way. Also, in between the time of you are exiled and you've returned back to Orzammar, you learn that Endrin Dukan, your father, has passed away. There are rumors that this was also due to poison. Jumping to the end of the game now, if the Warden survives, they are reinstated back into the House Dukan. And then they're also made a paragon, which means that there's a new warrior cast house with the name of whatever your first name of the Warden you chose was. Later in Inquisition, and if the Warden is alive, the Warden is considered missing. If Balin is king, he builds a large statue of them and vows to search for the paragon and refuses to claim that they have died. Haramount, on the other hand, builds a tiny statue and declares them dead. The Warden. After the playable origin story ends, then all of the Wardens are brought onto the same path through the game. Unite Ferelden against the Blight, fight the Blight, and defeat the Archdemon. It's at the end when 2 different types of path opens up for the Warden. The first one is that your Warden lives, either by completing the ritual with Morrigan or by having another companion complete the deed. From here, the Warden is then turned into the Warden Commander of Ferelden, leader of all Wardens in Ferelden. I won't go over deep details of all the plots of the DLC for the game, but in order of how they should be played, the Warden will take up the title of Warden Commander and begin to grow the Wardens in Amaranthine. They then find some talking darkspawn, some shit happens, and then they continue to grow the Wardens. Sometime later, the Warden goes out to Orzammar to meet a Dwarven man who wants to find his brother. They do so, and then they leave. And then, by request from the Ferelden Crown, orders from their higher-ups in the Wardens, and probably their own curiosity, the Warden sets out to find Morrigan. They do so, and from here, we have 2 main options. Either Morrigan goes to the Alluvion alone, or if the Warden romance Morrigan, goes with her. For the Morrigan Mancer Warden, they spend some time in the crossroads with Morrigan, and the 2 live with either a human or old god baby Kieran as a family. For the non-Morrigan Mancer, Morrigan tells him that she has found something interesting in an elven book. And the last we see of our Warden is him staring at an open book, and still, we have no solid answers to what was in it. From here, the Warden disappears. Literally. The Warden leaves their position as Warden Commander, and if married into royalty, they leave the crown behind as well. At the very end of Dragon Age 2, Liliana and Cassandra talk that they cannot find the Warden, which worried a lot of Liliana romancers. Only in the Inquisition do we find out where they went. A search for the cure of the calling. Oh, and Liliana actually knew the entire time she was just protecting them. And that so far is the last we hear of the Warden, in a letter to the Inquisitor asking to take care of any loved ones in the Inquisition and wishing them well in the fight against Corypheus. As for where exactly they are, we aren't really sure, but it's said that they are in lands far to the west that have never known a blight. Now, what was that second path I mentioned earlier? This one is slightly simpler. The Warden died killing the Archdemon. If a Dwarven Warden, your remains are reunited with the stone. If human or elven, your remains are taken to Weishaupt and placed next to 4 other bodies of those who have died defeating the Archdemon. And that's it. That's the end of their story. They are buried and honored and remembered by all. But the job of the Warden isn't over. Morrigan still needs to be found. Day still needs help finding his brother. And Amaranthine still needs a Warden Commander. The Warden Commander. If your Warden dies in the base game, you get the option of creating an Orlesian Warden to complete the DLC. Now, no one ever talks about this Warden Commander, and I bet most of you can name, if not all, most of the surnames of the Wardens and Origins, but I bet none of you can remember any of the Warden Commander's last names. They are Warden Commander Karen, Warden Commander Andras, and Warden Commander Cater. And here is where you expect me to go into their known history, but we don't have anything on their history or background. We have less than Cerana. The only thing I can say is that if you play a mage, Anders recognizes you from the circle, and if you play an elf, even though you can use the Dalish tattoos, at least I'm pretty sure you can, or I have some really fancy mods I've forgotten about, Valana never recognizes you as the Dalish. After the events of the DLC, the only thing we know about the Warden Commander is that they eventually stepped down from their position in Amaranthine, and it's unknown why or what they are currently doing. Now, I will say, because Warden Commander has the exact same ending in Witch Hunt as the Warden does, it's possible they might actually be on the same quest to cure the calling. It's just that less people know about it. And that, dear patrons, is all that we know on the Warden and Warden Commander. Now, if you excuse me, I will type up my thesis on how the Warden could probably come back in future games and send it to BioWare HQ, who will probably toss it in the bin where it might belong. Do you still have lingering questions, proof that I'm wrong, comments about your own fan theory? Feel free to tweet me at Gilderthon on Twitter or send a PM to user Gillanon on Reddit. Darashtaral.